What is up, fellas? And welcome to another episode of Rewriting History with me, the Goob. Everyone's talking about the SAR data, so I'm going to talk about the SAR data too, because everyone wants to talk about it. My computer is sitting on some. There we go. It was sitting on a pen. It was rolling around. So everyone's talking about the SAR data. I'm going to talk about the SAR data. I found it very interesting how everyone felt the need to weigh in immediately with their opinion of, oh, this is definitely bullshit, or this is definitely totally legitimate. Just the speed with which everyone had to voice their opinion was interesting for me to see, because as far as I'm concerned, there's still not enough information to actually make any real determinations about this data. But what can we figure out about it? Well, it definitely has some hallmarks of being bullshit. They don't seem to have a proof of concept yet. So this technology has been used in geological settings, right? So they've used it in similar applications to look at things geologically. This is the first time it's trying to be applied to an archaeological application. And their proof of concept is their 2022 scan of the Great Pyramid. This recent scan is not of the Great Pyramid, it's of the Khafre Pyramid. But in 2022, they scanned the Great Pyramid, and in that scan, they showed 20 new chambers, 20 undocumented, unknown about chambers that exist within the Great Pyramid that they discovered with their scan. Well, those chambers still haven't been verified. We still have zero evidence that those chambers are actually real. So for me, that's not really a great proof of concept. To them, they're going, look, not only does our technology work, but it works so much better than previous technology that we've even identified 20 new chambers. Coming up with a totally different model than the current model, not the best proof of concept, in my opinion. They need to do something like scan Kuyu. That's well known, that's well established, it's huge, it's underground. Go scan Kuyu and recreate that from your scan models. And if you can do that, you can demonstrate that this technology is real. But as it stands right now, we've really just got claims from them with no proof of concept. So this modern scan, this recent scan this year, was of the Khafre Pyramid. And as you guys, I'm sure, are aware, they showed these huge spiral columns underneath the pyramid. And I tried having an image up, but my StreamYard didn't want to show it. So I'm going to reopen it here and see if it'll work this time. Let's see if I can share my screen. So this just came out within like the last 24 hours. This is some additional information, and apparently a week from now, we're going to get a whole lot more additional information. I don't know exactly what that's going to include, but this is one of the scan images that the model was built on. This wasn't released initially, but it has been in the last like 48 hours or so. And more information does keep coming out on social media. I haven't been able to keep up with every single drop of information, but the big drop is coming a week from now. We'll see what that contains. But yeah, this is allegedly underneath the Khafre Pyramid. And I mean, on this scan, on this one image, this does seem to be showing pretty clearly some columns that are going beneath the pyramid. But can this data actually be trusted? Is it reliable? If you take a look at the 2022 report, they were able to show the existing and known features of the pyramid, but not that well, not that clearly. This is actually a much clearer image than most of the images from the Great Pyramid scan. And the way this technology works is it's looking apparently at micro vibrations, micro movements of the surface. And depending on how these blocks move on the surface, they can feed it through a complicated algorithm to get an idea of what's underneath. And if you take this from enough different angles, those micro movements are able to build a clear image of what's inside. That's the allegation. Again, we don't have a proof of concept that this actually works. They need to go scan Darren Kuyu or something like that. And their scan, like I said, it wasn't all that clear on their 22 report, which was of the Great Pyramid. This is looking beneath the Red Pyramid. So it's like penetrating way, way deeper. And so I would expect logically that like the ability of them to do that and do it clearly would get lesser as the deeper you're going. That doesn't seem to be what's displayed on that one singular image, right? That seems like a fairly clear image, but is that reliable at all? Again, they need to create a proof of concept. Until they do that, this is all just noise. But while it smells of bullshit, I'm not sitting here calling it bullshit. I think it's very foolish of all these people to come out with their opinions and go, yes, this is definitively bullshit. It's definitively real, when we don't have any of the information. All we had initially was an abstract, an image, and a claim. There was no information behind it. There's no data. The data is allegedly going to be released soon. But yeah, I'm leaning towards bullshit, but I'm holding out hope for this being real, because if it is real, this would revolutionize archaeology in a bigger way even than LiDAR did. LiDAR allowed us to peek through the canopy and see the extent to which South America had been developed, which many people knew, but now has been confirmed with LiDAR. This would allow us to peer underneath these megalithic sites all around the world and see the extent to which the underground structures exist. And LiDAR still requires you to travel to the country. It requires a plane. It requires permission. This doesn't require any of that. It's satellites. You're not actually interacting with the thing on the ground. You don't need permission. You're not requiring a plane. The satellites are already up there. You don't have to travel to the country. You just dial into the satellite. So if this technology does work, it would be massively revolutionary. And if this technology does work, I also expect that you would see a lot of cover-up, a lot of obfuscation, a lot of slander, a lot of things like that, because this would be disruptive not only to archaeology, but to world powers. Imagine mapping out Cheyenne Mountain in detail, right? You can just go map out all the underground military bases and structures. That's probably a pretty big issue. So if this tech is real, good luck like bringing this to the public. I think you're really, really facing an uphill battle there. But to me, it does ring of bullshit, but I'm holding out hope. So on to the vases, right? I don't know. You know, this is supposed to be like an intellectual group, the alternate history people, and it didn't seem very intellectual the way that everyone rushed to get out their very strong opinion on this immediately. That was kind of disappointing and interesting to see. But let's talk about these vases. Let's talk about these vases. Let me pull up the right screen here. Okay, so last week I was talking about this, but I wasn't all that well prepared because I was planning on doing a response to Night Scarab and I changed my mind at the last second. And then the day after, there was another massive drop of data on these vases. So this is Max Fomachev's analysis, which, while it's a good analysis, I appreciate having it, it's very light on information. We only actually get a light breakdown of what they did for two of these vases, the most precise vase V8 here and one of the less precise vases V18 here. And they show us their process a little bit, but they don't give us too many details, and we get no details on any of the other vases. So I really do hope all of that information comes out at some point in time, but we can take some looks here and get a bit of an idea. So this is they're mainly measuring two things. How round is each slice of this vase? How round is each slice of this vase? And then how well aligned are these slices of the vases? So are they all centered perfectly on the same point? This is the circular centering, and it's measured in inches times 10 to the negative 3, right? So we're looking at 0.000 like 35 inches here and 0.0007 up here. just to give you an idea of like the numerical, because I'm going to try and compare the analysis here to the analysis by Stein, which is difficult to do because one, limited information on this, and two, even though they're measuring the same things, there are differences. And so it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison. This is the circularity here. And again, it's within about 0.0007 of an inch here. And then we have the chart, which is mapping them all out. So this is V18, the very, very precise vase that was shown up above, the most precise vase, and then V8, their least precise vase. That's all we get from this one. And down here, right here, the RMSE, which is the same as the RMSD that we'll be looking at in the Stein report, their cutoff for precision is 0.03 millimeters. So if the RMSE, so if the circularity is within 0.03 millimeters, then it's precise. And if the alignment is also within 0.03 millimeters, it's precise. For the imprecise category, it's a factor of 10. So 0.3 millimeters if it's greater than 0.3, or if it's greater than 0.5 for the alignment. Okay. And they have a clear distinction between these classes. I am showing you guys. Yes. Okay. They have a clear distinction here on this graph. They look like they're close together, but this is 1 to 5. So this is 4 ticks right here in this space. This is 50 ticks right here in half of the space, right? So this graph is massively shrunk down. The gap between these and the gap between these is a lot larger than it appears here. Stein did the opposite with his analysis. So you have precision scores here ranging from 1 to almost 2,000. So on the Maxichev or whatever his name was report, the closer you get to 0, rather the closer you get to 1, the closer to perfect you're becoming, right? On the Stein report, the closer to 0 that he gets, the more precise it gets. But then he's inverting that number and squaring that number. So the reason he's doing this is, let's say you have a vase that's precise within 1 inch. If you have that precision, you double that precision, and you get it down to half an inch, right? That's a difficulty of, say, 1. If you then double that precision again down to 1/4 of an inch, that's now an increase of difficulty of 2. You've doubled the increase, even though you've only halved it again. And because you're halving it again, your numerical decrease is half. So you have this inversion of, increasing difficulty. It's just demonstrating diminishing returns, right? It's just demonstrating the increasing difficulty as it goes up. So 1905, this vase here is about twice as precise numerically. So if this vase had a deviation of 1, this vase down here, the PV006 621, would have a deviation of 2. So the scale doesn't slide directly, right, with the numerical reductions. Hopefully I explained that well enough. But yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at all of this new data that Stein just dropped. So he's uploaded, I've linked this in the description. He's uploaded all of these scans. You can view them here on YouTube. And the precision of these scans here is not the quality, what's the word? The resolution, right? The resolution of these scans is not as good as it is in the still images. So like you can see striations on this scan. Those striations are much, much clearer on these still images on the ArcSci website. And you can look here, 0.75 millimeters, a precision score of 9 for this vase. I'm just giving you a quick overview of all of these vases real quick. Scale of 0.8 millimeters, a precision score of 14. You can see the cracks in the vases, and you can't see the striations on here, but they're clearer on these still images. A scale of 0.6 millimeters, precision score of 12. Another thing that I like about Stein is that he broke down the precision of the interior and the exterior separately. This chart here is accounting for all of the precision across the entire vessel. So the exterior circularity, the interior circularity, the exterior alignment, the interior alignment, maybe a couple other factors too. And it's adding all of those together and giving an overall precision score, which is somewhat helpful. But I like how Stein broke down his precision scores individually by features. So the interior, the exterior, the circularity, the alignment, he provides all of those in these reports here. And I think that's important because, like, let's say you have, oh, I'm not showing it. How long have I not been showing it? My God, what is wrong with me? Let's say you have a vase that is highly, highly precise on the outside, but the inside is a mess. Okay, your overall precision score is going to be imprecise, but you can't achieve that high precision on the outside without being able to achieve precision. So I just, the analysis by Stein is so much better than the analysis by Maksamachev or whatever his name was. And, you know, I appreciate the analysis he did, but Stein's is just really, really good. Again, you can see those striations here. They're much clearer on the still images. 0.6 millimeters, precision score of 24. You can look at all of these on the YouTube channel. They're all right there. It's very cool to see. Precision score of 20, 0.6 millimeters. You can see some veins in this one of different hardnesses. Precision score of 5.29. This heat map, either it's less precise or that one was just much more highly polished. 0.2 millimeters, precision score 191. So this is one of the more precise vessels. You can clearly see it's handmade even without going to the still images. You can clearly see those striations that are, you know, having this crisscross pattern, not at all horizontal, does not appear to be machined on a lathe whatsoever. And in fact, out of all of the artifacts that were scanned in the Petrie Museum, none of them, with one small exception, which I'll address, none of them appear to have any indication of being lathed or machined. They all show signs of being handmade. This is a limestone vase with a quartz vein through it. That's what you can see on that other side. It's a precision score of 111. So this is one of the more precise vases. You can still see those hand, you know, those striations that are not at all horizontal. Precision score of 22. Okay. Couple more here. Precision score of 68. This scale changes on every one of these, 0.4 millimeters on this one. Again, you see those striations. They're much clearer in the still images, but you can even see them on here. And it's the same pattern on all of these vases. Like these handmade vases, the striations follow the same pattern where you can see they're crisscrossing around the handles. I think this one might have been a pottery vase. I'll have to double check that. This is from a private collection. So this is one of the ones that Stein analyzed, and this is the most precise one, the 1905. We're down to 0.1 millimeter. On that last one, I believe the scale was 2 millimeters. So on the least precise, we're on a scale of 2 millimeters. On the most precise, we're down to 0.1. Even on the inside, this is the inside of the vase, and we're still on a scale of 0.1. So this is a very, very precise vase, but it's coming from a private collection. Okay, so let's take a look over here at the catalog. And these are all of the Petrie Museum scores. You can see the precision scores. The highest score for a Petrie Museum item is 191. Okay, and that's the exterior of that vase gets a 191. The interior is less precise. And then down in the private collections, we have the 1905, which comparing that over here, it's about half as precise as the V18, from what I can tell. So it would, you know, be up here around the 5 mark. So that the most precise vase from Stein's data should fall around here. And that's from a private collection. The PV006, which is the globular granite jar I showed last week, the gray granite one, that is also a private collection with a score of 621. And then the 5-axis CNC, the modern created one, that has a precision score of only 84. So some of these handmade Egyptian vessels, let's go ahead and take a look at this one, the 191. We'll take a look at this report here. This is the vase. It's been broken. The top's been broken off. It's a teeny tiny little vase. It's like 2 inches tall or something like that. Don't mind me while I scroll through here. He's just explaining the two measurements that he's taking, the tolerance of the circle, so how circular it is, and how well do those circular circles stack on top of each other? How centered are they onto each other? Which is the DR and the RMSE that was measured in the other paper. So they're measuring the same things here. Here's where they're taking the slices from. Okay, and here is the RMSD, which should be directly comparable to the RMSE, or at least very closely comparable of the other report. So we can see in millimeters down here, 0.076, 0.086, their cutoff was 0.03. 0.03. And the cutoff for the imprecise was 0.3. So this is falling right in between there, closer to the precise category, but definitely well underneath that 0.3 cutoff that they labeled as imprecise. Here is each slice. So this is the slice that's taken. This is the circle of that slice rolled out flat. And then this is showing the deviation. So there's a high spot here of 10 thou of an inch. There's a low spot here of, also it looks like about 10 thou of an inch, 5 thou of an inch, right? So this is, I really like how Stein displays his data here. He gives you it in many different ways and makes it really easy to understand. And he gives a standard deviation of the, he graphs the deviation here, right? So if these were created with lathes, I would expect a more standard distribution, kind of like what you're seeing here, than a more randomized distribution. Is that a perfect way to tell if they were lathed or not? No, but it's indicative of it. And you can see these really aren't all that perfectly distributed, although they're not too bad. They're not too far off. They are fairly close to the I keep wanting to say standard deviation, but the standard distribution. Here again, we have, which one is this? The circularity of the vessel, okay? Pretty good numbers there. The max 0.113 on the interior, 0.504. So pretty good numbers. Pretty good numbers. Let's get down to the actual. Here's the RMSD, I believe. Maybe circle fit residual analysis for sample list. I don't even know what that is off the top of my head. I can understand most of Stein's report, not all of it. I'm trying to get to the interesting parts. I'm trying to highlight what it's showing so you guys can look at it on your own. Here we go. So here's the RMSD, 43 micrometers for the exterior, which is 0.043 millimeters. So that's just above that cutoff for their RMSD of 0.03 millimeters. This is 0.043 millimeters. And as you're going to see when I finally get to it, here we go. This is what I was looking for. That looks pretty clearly handmade to me, right? That there's certainly no indication of a lathe here. You have this crisscrossing pattern of, they're rubbing down this vase, they're shaping this vase very, very clearly. At the very least, it was hand polished after it was lathed, but I don't think there's any indication of lathe work here. And it's a fairly precise vase. Let me zoom out a little bit so you get the scale here. This is on 0.2 millimeters, right? The most precise vase was on 0.1 millimeters. Okay, so this isn't that much worse than the most precise one, but it's clearly handmade. again, you've got the RMSD displayed here, 0.072 millimeters. Why is that doubled? Because I'm assuming that one's adding the negative and positive, whereas the other measurement, which was half of that, is just measuring the absolute deviation. And then down here, we have a little bit of a comparison. This has a score of 191. It's not 10 times less precise. Remember, this is, as I explained earlier, the way he's squaring this. So it's kind of hard to interpret these. This 621 is would certainly fall into the precise category for the exterior. All right, let me highlight another jar. So that was the most precise vase from the Petri scan. Was that one, a clearly handmade vase? That's the most precise one. But there is another object that has a precision score of 219, and it's a bull. Don't worry, I'm not going to go over all the data again. You can look at that on your own. I'm going to skip down to the scan here. So this is the exterior surface. We're dealing in entire millimeters here. So plus a millimeter, minus a millimeter. This is a 2 millimeter range on the exterior. The exterior is not very precise. However, the interior, now we're on a scale, we've just divided by 5. This is a range of 0.2 millimeters, same as the last vase, the precise diorite vase, right? And this is looking significantly more precise. There is some banding here. You can see it looks like there's some rotational banding on it. It's not strong, but there does seem to be some indication of rotational banding. So was this not handmade? Right? We're teetering on the area of RMSD for the interior 0.068. It's not quite the 0.03, but it's well under 0.3. I don't think this is indicative of machining. I don't think this is indicative of lathing, and I'll explain why. This is the same reason why I didn't really feel comfortable making a direct comparison between the Bison Hill shot glasses and what is wrong with my screen? Something's wrong with my screen. There we go. With the Bison Hill shot glasses and the vases is because the bull has a wider opening than the bottom, right? In the vases, you have a narrow opening that then flares out. You can't just like drop something into that and start rotating. For the bull, you can. You can create very, very good circularity with just a handheld rotational tool here. You put a stone on a stick and you spin it in your hands, and you can actually create pretty remarkable circularity and precision doing just that, because it's just going to settle down itself. It's a self-correcting system. As long as you're having that rotation in there, it's going to self-center and it's going to create that circularity on its own. You don't require something like a lathe. You don't require high technology to create really, really impressive precision like you see on the interior of this bowl. But you can't do that with the vases, right? It's not the same process when you're going through a narrow opening and trying to flare it out. Right? So this is an example of very, very, very impressive handcrafted precision. So was that diorite vase on the outside. That was very, very impressive handcrafted precision, going to 0.07 millimeters. That's beyond what I would have expected would be possible, honestly. So I'm very impressed, but you can clearly see those hand marks still. We took a look at this vase. This is one from the private collection. We took a look at this vase last week, and it only gets even more confusing with the additional data. One thing to highlight, you see, again, pretty standard fill here, pretty standard distribution, because this one is very, very precise, pretty standard distribution, which again, I would take as an indication of lathing, of rotation. But when we look at the actual scan of this thing, you see very, very interesting features. I see zero horizontal banding, and I see very clear vertical banding. This does not appear to have been turned on a lathe. It's definitely precise. Let me scroll up a little bit to find the RMSD of this thing. The RMSD right here, 29 micrometers. So that is within that 0.03 millimeters. The exterior of this falls into the precision category for this. Again, this is taking into account many different factors and adding them all together. But if you're looking at just the exterior circularity of this, it would fall into the precise class. But I don't know how this thing was made, because this level of precision, I do not think is possible with hand tools. I don't think this is possible with hand tools. The other vase, the white diorite vase, that was really, really impressive. I still see that as possible with hand tools, but like that was a master craftsman for sure. That is not something an average person could do. Someone who is a true master at their craft managed to make that white and black diorite vase. But this goes beyond, in my opinion, what's achievable with hand tools. So I don't know how this was made. This is a mystery to me. And then when we go back to these scans here with the banding, right now we have the clearly handmade vases of Stein's report from the Petrie Museum. Those are clearly handmade. We have the clearly lathe-made pieces of Matt Bell's report. We have that anomalous vase, the PV006 of Stein's report. And then we have these with this very strange banding, which Gulag suggested maybe a bow lathe could explain this, which I could see possibly as the answer. I really don't know. Again, I need someone who calibrates lathes and fixes and adjusts lathes all day to weigh in on this. But fuck me. I swear to God, I was showing it. How long have I not been showing it? God, dude, I'm genuinely starting to hate myself for like fucking up with that as much as I do. It's actually starting to piss me off. So if this was a bow lathe, the issue I had with a bow lathe is that in order for this to be possible, these levels of precision with a bow lathe, you absolutely require steel. You're not doing this with wood. You're not doing this with copper. It's just not happening. It's the deflection is going to be way too much. And I linked a brand new video from ClickSpring, where he's talking about exactly that, how he's achieving his precision with his bow lathe for the Antikythera mechanism and the challenges he's having in doing that. And he's even using iron, right? So, but that's with the assumption that this is truly pre-dynastic. Could this be a modern forgery? And could this be from a bow lathe from the 18 or 1900s from Egypt? And it absolutely could be. So what is all of this meaning? Well, we have potentially modern-made bow lathe vases here. We have potentially modern machine lathe vases here. And then we have clearly handmade, imprecise vases from the Petrie Museum that are, I'm assuming these are definitively pre-dynastic because Petrie also was purchasing these things from street vendors. So not everything in Petrie's museum is actually directly found by Petrie. I'm assuming that Caroli did the legwork to verify that these actually were objects found by Petrie and not just ones he purchased, but I don't know that for certain. But what we can say pretty definitively is that all of these show very clear signs of being made by hand. There's a couple examples. There's like two examples One, the striations are really, really faint. You really have to zoom in and look closely to see them. In one, I couldn't see striations on at all. It was definitely an imprecise vessel, though. So that's just more indicative of more polishing done. But I imagine if it had been polished a little bit less, you would still see those same, and it's the exact same pattern. Like you see them coming around the handles, they're rubbing down, across the vase and then crisscross this way around the handles and above the handles. And yeah, it's clearly indicative of the same process, the same hand process, making all of those vessels in the Petrie Museum. So I've been here saying with pretty strong confidence that all of these are truly pre-dynastic vessels. And here we have data that is not definitively proving they're not. There's a lot more data that needs to be collected before we start making statements like that. But if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, my confidence level that these are legitimate pre-dynastic vases would have been like 99%. You ask me now, it's at like 60%. I'm still leaning towards these are legitimate. There's a lot of factors that I'm not going to go into all of them, but there are a lot of factors that still lead me to believe that these precision vessels are truly pre-dynastic. And I'm sure there are modern forgeries mixed in, but some of them at least are pre-dynastic. But with this data, my confidence has definitely taken a hit. So we really, really need to get into the museums now and start scanning the museum pieces, both the ones that are from private collections, because a lot of museum pieces are not tied directly to burial sites. They are from private collections, just like Matt Bell's vases, right? But there are also a lot that are directly tied to burial sites. So if we are unable to find any that are directly tied to burial sites that do show these levels of precision and that show signs of being rotationally created, maybe the naysayers were actually right, and maybe these are all modern forgeries. I'm not declaring that yet, but I see that as much stronger of a possibility than I did before, which would be pretty disappointing because these vases are really exciting, and them being legitimately ancient would be very exciting. It would also be very big news if these were fakes, because again, I just said a lot of the museum's pieces are from private collections as well. A lot of the museum's pieces visually seem to display this extreme precision as well. So if they are all modern forgeries, that means a lot of museums have a lot of bullshit artifacts on their shelves. And how much more could this apply to other than vases? Right? It would be a pretty big credibility hit for archaeology. Wow, you guys have been active as hell in chat. Let me take a look at what you guys are saying. Yeah, the crime is the hype. The hype was so weird. I mean, things blow up and go viral, but this was like the speed with which everyone had to weigh in. It was kind of strange to watch. Yeah, that was another difficulty, is that the Matt Bell's report, and it's not his report, but his name's easier to say than the actual guy's name, is in imperial, and the other one's in metric, although he was nice enough to give imperial and metric. There's some typos in those reports. Like I found some instances where the imperial wasn't converted to metric and some other things. So be careful reading them. Make sure I've gone. Hopefully I haven't gone. Make sure what you're reading is accurate, because there are some mistakes in the reports. Yes, and that's my takeaway as well. That was my takeaway, is that the fact that they haven't given a proof of concept, and the fact that they came out with this big, bold claim without any data to back it up definitely reeks of bullshit. But it's not necessarily. It's not necessarily. I'm still holding out hope, but it definitely smells a little. Yes, that is correct. Hopefully I explained that. He made it much easier for someone who is not a statistics master to understand. He gives your average layman might still struggle. I mean, I was still struggling with parts of it. Some of it's really clear, some of it's less clear. But he does do a much better job of breaking it down. He also just much better provides much more complete information. You really just get a conclusion from Matt's report. You get a full breakdown of all of the information for each and every vessel with Stein. If you have the interest in the patients, I would highly recommend you go look at Stein's reports. They are packed full of information. Maybe you'll be able to extract some information that I wasn't able to. Yeah. Yes. I think that was actually of Khufu's pyramid, but yes. So I think you're mixing up the two scans. That's the 2022 scan, the one that showed all of the copies of the King's Chamber. And this more recent scan isn't of the pyramid itself. It's just below the pyramid. So a lot of people thought the scans were related, that they were of the same pyramid. They're not. Yeah. Potentially. Like, potentially. There does seem to be evidence of Peru using water glass, and I don't know where they're getting that water glass. Were they getting it by using natron to melt stones, like the natron theory suggests? I don't know, but it does seem that they had water glass. So, yeah, I'm genuinely hating myself for that now. It's unreasonable how much I do that. Yeah, I do. I joked about putting my television behind my laptop here on my desk, and maybe I actually will do it because I don't even use it as a television. I don't watch TV like on my TV at least. So I might do that because this is getting unforgivable at this point. Okay, so it looks like you guys are just chatting amongst yourselves. Yeah, do you guys have any input? I'll open up the phone lines if anyone wants to call in. Next week, I want to finally present my theory for Peru. I was developing a theory on Peru and a lost civilization, and I think it's solid enough to present. But as I was like honing in on the final details, I introduced the new factor of the Nazca mummies to that equation, and it kind of blew everything up. And I ended up never presenting my theory, and I talked about the Nazca mummies instead. But I do want to get that out there because I do see some pretty strong indications of a pre-Inca civilization that covered a pretty large area. And not everything's clear. I think there could have been multiple lost civilizations, but there's like similarities between the stones. There's certain features that you find all the way from Pumapunku all the way down to the Nazca region. So I'll try and present that next week. And yeah, the scan data of these vases, fellas, I really hate to say how much it seems to be indicating that these could be modern frauds, because I've been quite confident that they're not. There's definitely a possibility that they're all modern frauds. I was writing that as a very small possibility before. I was keeping it alive as an option, but I wasn't giving it much credence. Now, if further data continues to support what we saw with the Stein report, that might be pretty condemning. If we get another group of 20 vessels and they all confirm what Stein is seeming to depict, that could be pretty condemning. I don't think it's necessarily condemning yet, but it has definitely shaken my confidence. But if no one wants to call in, that's all I've got for today. Holding out hope for the SARS data. I do hope it's real. I do hope it revolutionizes archaeology. That would be incredible if we get ground penetrating LiDAR, essentially. That would be massive. There are underground works, massive underground works associated with these megalithic structures all around the world, and they just don't get covered. I am going to talk about that for 1 minute before I end this stream. I do believe there is actually a cover-up with the underground nature of things with the megalithic sites. But like most of these cover-ups, 90% of it is just kind of human nature. It just kind of happens naturally. It's been years since I've seen it. So 0.75 miles, 1.5 miles, something like that. It was long, right? Tunnel underneath the Giza Plateau. It's in the shape of a J. It's like a mile long, and there's nothing in it. It doesn't connect to anything. It doesn't connect to anything. There's no decorations in it. There's no markings in it. There's no artifacts in it, but it's all finely lined. It's lined perfectly, floor, ceiling, walls with perfectly polished white Chura limestone. What the hell is that? I have no idea. And why have you never heard of it? Well, one reason you've never heard of it is because, like, that's not a tourist destination. What tourist is going to go to the Giza Plateau and then go, yeah, I want to climb down underground in a pitch black tunnel with no ventilation, with no features of any note, and I want to walk for a mile and then walk back for a mile? No one is going to do that. So it's not going to be a tourist destination. Who's even going to talk about it online? Yes, it's interesting to someone like me, but there's so many more interesting features readily available above ground on the Giza Plateau. So it's just not going to get focus. Good luck finding this thing through a search engine. You can search for J-shaped, U-shaped tunnel. I had more details back then, and I have searched for this thing many times. I've gone through the Giza 3D scan project where they're 3D mapping everything on the Giza Plateau and looked for it there. I couldn't find it, or many of the underground structures I couldn't find on there. And so, yeah, these things don't even really need covered up necessarily. It just kind of naturally, this is not what's going to be most interesting to most people. It's not what's going to get the most attention. And because of the way our search engines are structured and everything, it's just not going to appear. You're not going to see it. But also with how little underground structures are talked about with these megalithic sites and how extensively they are found underneath these megalithic sites, I do see some degree of actual suppression and cover up there. Why? I don't know. Why don't they want us knowing what's going on underground? But it seems like they don't. So, all right. That was the final point I wanted to add. And that's it. Peace out, fellas. I'll catch you next week, hopefully with my Peru lost civilization theory.